Pennsylvania. And Senator Toomey joins us now from Capitol Hill. Senator, great to have you on the show with us. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to ask you straight out what you make of Senator Langford's proposal for a trigger that could automatically see rate rises if the growth projections don't pan out and we don't see the revenues that the GOP is hoping for as part of this plan.
Well, I think the problem with triggers is they create uncertainty about what the tax rate is. And when you introduce that uncertainty, it undermines the effectiveness of the tax reform to generate more economic growth and investment in the first place. So sometimes I think a trigger could have a sort of self-fulfilling effect that would be detrimental. So I think it's far better to have as much permanence, have the rates as low as we can get them, and create the maximum incentive to save and invest and grow jobs and business in America. That's a better approach.
I hear what you're saying, but to what extent, Senator, do you share Senator Langford's concerns that the tax bill as it currently stands does not result or may not result in sufficient levels of economic growth to cover the tax cuts?
You know, we've never had tax reform of this nature, allowing full expensing so that we tremendously encourage the purchase and utilization of new equipment, a dramatic reduction in the marginal corporate rate, moving to a territorial system so people around the world have all the incentive in the world to invest in the United States. The combination of all of those things is going to be powerful. And if you look at the score of our bill and the rules that we're working with, it'll only take 0.4% of extra economic growth, a fraction of 1% of extra growth to make this deficit shrinking, to make this revenue positive. So I'm very confident we can hit that goal. We had a number of economists in today's Wall Street Journal in a letter attesting to their view that this will generate the kind of growth we need. No, I have a lot of confidence. We're going to have a smaller deficit if we pass this bill.
Senator, I want to talk to you about the state and local tax deductions as well, because there's clearly been pushback on the GOP as far as this is concerned on the Senate here. Would you be willing to see a cut to the top rate of tax in order to offset some of the burden that's placed on the wealthier in the nation as a result of losing those states and local tax deductions?
Look, I'd be in favor of lowering all individual marginal rates, including the top rate. As you may recall, in the House, the top rate remains at 39.6, and effectively it's even higher because some deductions, I should say some income that's taxed at lower rates goes away in the House bill. We have a lower rate and we don't have that bubble effect. I'd like to take it further, but really we're dealing with the constraint that the score of this policy cannot be more than $1.5 trillion in foregone revenue without taking into account all of the economic growth and the dynamic feedback that comes from that. So it's a question of having a limited size box to put a lot of policies we'd like to have in that box.
What can you tell us with regards to whether there's a plan to preserve the SALT deductions in any form, whether it's something like the $10,000 property tax exemption like the House bill?
The Senate bill does not have that, right? The Senate bill disallows all state and local tax deduction on the part of individuals, which I think is good policy. However, the House put in, as you point out, a $10,000 exception for property taxes. Look, at the end of the day, we need something that can pass both chambers. And so if we pass the bill in the current form on the Senate side, then that would be an item that we'd have to negotiate with our House colleagues.
But the senators will be willing to do that. You'd be willing to do that.
Look, I'm open to having that conversation. This is not a religious thing for me to disallow the state and local tax deduction, but it does allow us to have lower rates than we would otherwise have. So I prefer disallowing it. At the end of the day, I want to make sure we pass really pro-growth tax reform that lowers taxes for middle-income families. That's the end result we have to get to.
We also want to bring you some headlines from the president right now. He's speaking to reporters in the Oval Office. He says that he thinks the tax bill is going very well, and he says it's likely we will have a bipartisan bill. So once again, the president saying that he thinks the tax bill is going very well and that it's likely we'll have a bipartisan bill. Julia.
Senator, you expect some Democrats to be on board with this in the end?
Well, you know, they've gone to great lengths to mischaracterize and to demonize this legislation. But at the end of the day, there are certain facts that are going to be hard for them to avoid. One is it lowers taxes for middle-income families and low-income families. It gives the people they represent a pay raise by virtue of lowering the amount of money they have to send to Uncle Sam, and it encourages more economic growth and job creation by allowing our business to be competitive. At the end of the day, if Republicans have enough votes to pass this ourselves, we might get a few Democrats who will join us.
Senator, as a member of the Senate Banking Committee, you'll be holding the Powell confirmation hearing starting tomorrow. How important is it that Jerome Powell signals continuation of Janet Yellen's policy?
Well, my preference would be not a continuation of the Yellen policy. I think we've engaged in a very dangerous, extended, and unprecedented experiment in monetary policy with negative real interest rates and this massive expansion of the Fed balance sheet. I think it's important that we normalize interest rates and monetary policy, and I think it's important that we push back on the wildly excessive regulation that we've hit financial services with, as most aspects of our economy, but in particular financial services in recent years. So I'm looking forward. I'm going to be meeting with Mr. Powell later today prior to the hearing. We'll have a discussion tomorrow. I'm looking forward to hearing his views about normalizing monetary policy and pushing back on some of the excessive regulation.
All right. Our thanks to Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania joining us from Capitol Hill. Of course,